Got some new fan art here. Slowly making my way through the folder. I'll get all of it eventually. Plus, I got some new fan art that's top notch. So it turns out I've got a friend who grew up as Church of Christ. Honestly, I didn't know anything about this group until I heard about it from him. But the more I hear about it, the less I like. The more cult-like it seems to me. Let's get into it. So what is Church of Christ? When I first heard about it, I thought it was just another vanilla denomination alongside Methodist and Baptist and all the other billion different splinter groups that are basically the same. Turns out this one is a little more unique. So let's take a look at the history of the Church of Christ first. Just like Catholics, they claim that the church started when Jesus died in 33 CE. Of course, that's complete bullshit. They didn't start the day Jesus died. They can claim that all they want, but they didn't call it Catholicism back then, and there wasn't even an organizational structure to speak of. They're claiming that they're a continuation of the congregations that were set up by the apostles around that time. But Catholicism got its first official pope between 232 CE and 248 CE, or around 1800 years ago, somewhere in there. They claim that the Apostle Peter was the first pope, and they have a continuing line they retroactively elected dating back to the moment Jesus allegedly died. Same with the Church of Christ. They claim that their religion is a continuation of the Christian congregations that were set up immediately after Jesus died. Obvious bullshit. They actually started in the 1800s, much like many other religions we know and love today, including, but not limited to, Mormons, Millerites, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists. The 1800s were a popular time for religious cults to form. As I was saying, they formed in the 1800s, and then in 1906, the U.S. religious census showed the Church of Christ and the Christian churches as separate entities for the first time in history. They identified themselves in such unique, distinct ways that they just didn't fit with the Christian churches anymore. For example, they don't believe in using musical instruments. That dates back all the way to the 1860s. I'll get into that in a little bit. And by the way, just to take a quick step back, the Christian church is actually a denomination of Christianity. I wasn't referring to Christian churches generally. It was pretty popular in the mid-1800s, and it's also known as the Disciples of Christ. In 2008, there were 679,000 members in 3,714 congregations in North America. And in 2015, there were around 497,000 baptized members in 3,267 congregations. So it's really small now. To give a little context, there are around 2 million Church of Christ members in 40,000 congregations in the world, around 13,000 congregations in the US. Jehovah's Witnesses have about 7.6 million active members worldwide, and Mormons have about 14 million members worldwide. And there are about 210,000 Quakers worldwide. So there's a little scale for you. As far as their organizational structure goes, it's a little bit divided. With Jehovah's Witnesses, there's an organization at the head of the whole thing, and everybody reports to them. Everybody has to follow their instructions and direction. That's called denominational structure. With the Church of Christ, it's more fractured. Individual churches set up their own rules mostly, and the elders at the top of the church are the ones who call the shots, completely. There's no check on their power at all, and only elders can appoint or remove other elders. Ex-members I've spoken to have felt like if you're related to the elders who do the rulemaking and the punishing, then things are great for you. If you're just a normal member, then you're treated like shit. This is a little bit different from any other regular church in the sense that they completely control your life, down to every detail sometimes. When somebody controls your life and your family so completely, and they start to abuse their power a little bit, the ripple effects from it can be devastating. Feeling like somebody who has power over you is abusing that power is a terrible feeling, and can have serious psychological effects. In a standard moderate church like a Methodist church, if the pastor's an people can switch to a new one, or even vote the pastor out when the general conference rolls around. It doesn't really work that way with the Church of Christ. It isn't as simple as switching to another. You become a social pariah, and they aren't just popping up all over the place. In my town, there's a Methodist or a Baptist church on every other street corner. With Jehovah's Witnesses or Churches of Christ, you get them staggering their locations based on need, based on how many people there are in various areas. areas. And with Jehovah's Witnesses, at least, they've kind of started assigning people to specific kingdom halls, splitting up families in some cases, making them even more reliant on the church. Something I find interesting about this group, and others, is how welcoming they are to other races during a time when racial tension and hatred was extreme. So 1863, Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. Slaves are legally free, but it continued on even after that in some areas in the South. Not just slavery, but we had colored and white water fountains and bathrooms all the way up to the 1960s, with the Civil Rights Act in 1964. And the Civil Rights Act didn't even stop all that shit. It did a lot, but not enough. There are still schools in Alabama with segregated proms, to this day. In 1907, multiple leaders of the Church of Christ movement at the time, as much as a fractured non-denominational church can have leadership, openly stood against slavery. Brace yourself for this one. One of the leaders said, to object to any child of God participating in the service on account of his race, social or civil state, his color or race, is to object to Jesus Christ and to cast him from our association. It is a fearful thing to do. I have never attended a church that Negroes did not attend. One would think that would be a point in their favor, but the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses said the same thing. The reason they try to unite people like that is because they want to point the tribalism in another direction. They want to make it an us versus them kind of thing. They want to minimize infighting, maximize their public image, and focus the hatred on apostates and outsiders. The irony is that Mormons did the exact opposite. They wouldn't let black people become full members of the church until the 1970s. Why can't they just not bring race into it at all? Treat them like normal members of the church. If I felt like their intentions were pure, I wouldn't get hung up on this point. They have this us versus them mentality, and they just use race relations to fortify it. Now, about the musical instruments bit I mentioned earlier. Their reasoning for not using musical instruments is because they don't have the authority from God to use them. Quote unquote. Apparently, there aren't any examples of the early church using instruments in worship in the Bible, according to the Church of Christ. Just another way to separate their members and their services from the rest of society. I asked an ex-member for some examples of things he noticed when he was on the inside, and I'm going to compare them to Stephen Hassan's BITE model. I've mentioned the BITE model before, but I'm going to talk about it again. It stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. On the list are things that you can expect from a cult. Let's compare this list against the BITE model. No expression of worship in the service. You're expected to sit there and sing. That's behavior control to the core. You have to use the word preacher instead of pastor. Using pastor is a grievous sin, and you'll get in some deep shit for using pastor or minister. It was the same with Jehovah's Witnesses, more behavior control. Celebrating Christmas was discouraged. This one is emotional control. Church activities with other churches were only allowed if that other church was a Church of Christ. Behavior control and information control, separating them from society. They don't want them associating with the outgroup. It doesn't help that they're young earth creationists. They aren't allowed to hang out with people outside their church, so they'll never have their opinions challenged. That one falls firmly under thought control. Like I said, the churches are pretty fractured, but the church my friend went to didn't like contemporary Christian music. They only sang songs from like the 1800s. I'd call this behavior control. According to him, you weren't shunned if you left the church, but if you did, everyone talked about you behind your back. Socially ostracize you. That goes under emotion control. You were encouraged to go to a Church of Christ college, and if you went to a regular college, they treated it like you didn't go to college at all. Yes, they have Church of Christ colleges. They're that big. That surprised me too. He actually told me about how the church would all get some things together and send some packages to the kids off of the Church of Christ college, but they left him off that list because he went to a normal non-Christian university instead. That's definitely emotional control. Other denominations were stigmatized heavily. They never said that only Church of Christ go to heaven, but it was implied. They also said that God only really listened to the prayers of the baptized. Not a huge leap from God doesn't listen to the outgroup's prayers to people in the outgroup won't make it to heaven at all. That's drawing a dark line between the in-group and the outgroup. Thought control. And on a personal note, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that only active baptized Jehovah's Witnesses are going to make it through Armageddon. All other 7 billion people on the planet are going to die in Armageddon, and the Jehovah's Witnesses who make it through Armageddon will be tasked with burying the bodies after it's all over. Baptism by full immersion, anything else doesn't count, no matter your intent. That includes sprinkling water on somebody. Some people have real water phobias, or they're paraplegic and can't easily do a full immersion thing. But it doesn't matter. Either they go completely under or they don't make it to heaven. That's hardline black and white thinking. They don't think of themselves as a denomination because all denominations with a central head like Baptists or Catholics were not doing it like the Church of Acts. More black and white thinking. Women weren't allowed to do anything. They weren't allowed on the stage at all. Their place was either teach Sunday school or cook dinners. They were not to speak up. That was a man's job. That's interesting to me because we know that the Bible is a compilation of random manuscripts and texts unearthed over multiple millennia and crammed together only very recently comparatively. It was written by like a billion different people, and there's basically no cohesiveness to it. But they pick out a single verse from a single writer, from a single chapter, from a single book, and they model their entire societal structure around it. 2 Timothy 2:12. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. Did Jesus say that? No. That was supposedly Paul, we think. To the best of our knowledge. We're as certain as we can be, okay? Maybe that isn't that certain, but who cares? I mean, we just found a scroll in the middle of nowhere that had the name Jesus in it, so it must have been written by God himself. And this one verse out of 23,145 other verses says it. So let's build our whole leadership hierarchy to exclude half the population of the planet by default. If I had to call it, I would say that this one is definitely a cult. Hands down. There's no question in my mind. I just take solace in the fact that this religion is slowly dying out. Not fast enough, but it's on the decline. Anyways, that's all I've got for you guys. Follow me on social media, check out my science channel, and join my Discord. I talk to fans every Sunday and Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Discord voice chat. So if you want to be on the podcast, that's how you do it. Send me a direct message on Discord and ask if you can appear. I answer all DMs right now, and I will continue to until they get completely out of control. All links are in the description. Thanks for watching, guys.